Hello everyone, and welcome once again to my YouTube channel, The English Globe, where we bring you thoughtful, insightful, and engaging conversations to help you improve your English in a natural and enjoyable way. I hope all of you are doing well, staying motivated, and ready to challenge yourselves with today's deep and meaningful discussion. Now, in this episode, we have something particularly enriching for our advanced English learners. We're going to take a comprehensive look at the topic of education and university life, which is not only a vital part of personal development for many people around the world, but also a topic that comes with an entire world of vocabulary, cultural nuances, and real-life expressions that you'll definitely want to master. As always, I'm not alone in this journey. I'm thrilled to be joined by my wonderful co-host, someone who brings a great deal of insight, warmth, and knowledge to every episode. Julia, how are you today?
Hi, Adam. I'm doing great, and thank you so much for that kind introduction. Hello to all of our amazing listeners. It's always a pleasure to be here with you. I'm genuinely excited about today's episode because education is one of those topics that connects us all. No matter where we come from, what our background is, or what language we speak, we've all had some experience with school, teachers, exams, classmates, and those unforgettable moments that shape us both academically and personally. And what's really fascinating is that while the idea of education is universal, the structure, style, and student experience can vary dramatically from country to country, institution to institution, and even between students within the same classroom. University life in particular brings with it a whole new set of experiences, from living independently, forming lifelong friendships, managing stress, and balancing studies with social life. It's an incredibly rich topic for advanced learners to explore, not just for the vocabulary, but for the deeper understanding of culture and communication as well.
Absolutely, Julia. You've described it so well. That's exactly why this topic is so valuable for our listeners, especially those who are trying to expand their fluency in English in a way that feels authentic and meaningful. So whether you're currently enrolled in a university, preparing for your academic journey abroad, reminiscing about your own student days, or simply looking to gain a more advanced understanding of how to speak naturally about education-related topics in English, then this episode is going to be a great learning companion for you. We're going to explore every corner of this subject, from how different educational systems work around the world, to how students choose their majors, manage the ups and downs of university life, interact with professors, prepare for exams, and even how education itself is evolving in this modern, tech-driven world. So, grab a notebook if you like, get comfortable, and let's begin this engaging and educational conversation that we hope will not only improve your English listening skills, but also open your mind to the incredible diversity and complexity of academic life around the globe.
All right, let's begin our conversation today by taking a broader look at the world and exploring how different countries approach the idea of education. Because although the concept of going to school is something shared across almost every culture, the systems, expectations, and even the values that are attached to education can be remarkably different depending on where you are. So, Adam, since you grew up in the UK and went through the British educational system, why don't you start us off by sharing a little bit about what your experience was like as a student growing up in that environment? What kind of structure does the education system there typically follow? And how did you personally find it?
That's a great place to start, Julia, and I'd be happy to share. So in the UK, and I should mention that while there are some regional variations between England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland, the general structure of education typically begins with what we call primary school, which starts around the age of 5 and continues until about the age of 11. This is followed by secondary school, which runs from about age 11 to 16. And during those years, students work toward earning their GCSEs, which stands for General Certificate of Secondary Education. These are national qualifications in a range of subjects. Now, after finishing secondary school, students have a couple of different options depending on their goals and interests. Many choose to go on to what we call college or sixth form, which lasts for 2 years and is more focused on academic preparation for university. During this time, they typically study for their A-levels, which are advanced qualifications that play a major role in determining what universities and courses they can apply to. University itself, for most undergraduate programs in the UK, usually lasts 3 years, although some degrees, especially in fields like engineering, medicine, or those that include a placement year or study abroad, may last 4 years. One interesting and important thing to mention is that students in the UK tend to specialize much earlier than, say, their counterparts in the United States. That means, by the time you enter university, you've already chosen your specific area of study, or what we call your degree course, and you dive straight into that subject with very little general education.
That's really fascinating, Adam, especially the fact that students specialize so early. I think that's one of the biggest differences between the UK and the US systems, because in the United States, the approach is quite different and often described as much more broad-based and exploratory, particularly in the first couple of years of university. So, for example, American students typically go through elementary school, which covers grades kindergarten through 5th, then move on to middle school, also called junior high in some places, for 6th through 8th grades, and then attend high school from 9th to 12th grade. After graduating from high school, students receive a high school diploma, and from there, many choose to apply to universities or colleges to pursue higher education. What makes the American university system unique is that students usually spend the first 2 years taking a variety of courses across different fields. These are called general education requirements, before officially declaring a major. That means someone might take classes in literature, history, math, science, philosophy, and even physical education, all before deciding what specific field they want to focus on. It's a system that allows for a lot of exploration and flexibility, which can be incredibly helpful for students who are still figuring out what they want to do with their careers, or who have multiple interests they'd like to pursue at the same time.
Yes, and I think that flexibility has both advantages and disadvantages, depending on the type of learner you are. On one hand, the American system gives students more time to explore different subjects and discover what truly excites or motivates them academically, which is fantastic if you're unsure about your path. But on the other hand, it can also be quite overwhelming, especially when you're juggling multiple classes that may not seem directly related to your career goals, all while trying to make a big decision about your future, often with very little guidance or support.
That's a great point. And just to pause briefly for our listeners, I'd like to highlight the word overwhelming. This is a very common and useful word in English, especially in academic and emotional contexts. When something is overwhelming, it means that it's simply too much to handle. It could be an overload of information, a feeling of stress, or a situation where you feel emotionally or mentally stretched beyond your limits. For example, a student might say, "I have so many assignments and deadlines this week, it's really overwhelming." Or, "All the choices in front of me are overwhelming. I don't even know where to begin."
Exactly. And that feeling of being overwhelmed is something students in any country can relate to, especially during major transitions like starting university or trying to adjust to a completely new academic system. And that brings us to another interesting point, the cultural attitudes toward education, which can vary widely depending on where you're from. For instance, in some countries like South Korea or China, there's often a very strong emphasis on academic achievement and standardized testing, with students spending many hours a day in school and attending extra tutoring sessions late into the evening. The competition can be intense, and the pressure to succeed, whether from family, society, or oneself, is incredibly high. On the other hand, in countries like Finland, the focus is more on holistic education, student well-being, and creative problem-solving, rather than just memorizing facts or preparing for exams. Teachers are highly respected professionals, students receive more autonomy in how they learn, and the school day is often shorter, but more focused on quality over quantity.
That's such an important comparison. And it shows how education is shaped not just by curriculum, but also by culture, history, and national values. In some places, the goal of education is to produce high-performing students who will become competitive professionals in the global market, while in others, the emphasis might be on cultivating creativity, emotional intelligence, and lifelong learning. As learners of English, especially at an advanced level, it's really valuable to understand these different perspectives because they influence the way people talk about education, the kinds of challenges students face, and even the types of vocabulary and idioms that are used in conversation.
Now, let's shift our focus to something that's incredibly important in the journey of higher education, something that can shape not only your academic path, but potentially the direction of your entire professional life. And that is, of course, the process of choosing a major. This is one of those pivotal decisions that almost every university student faces at some point, and the experience of choosing a field of study can be dramatically different depending on the country, the culture, the university structure, and even individual personality. In my experience, some students seem to know from a very early age exactly what they want to do with their lives, whether it's becoming a doctor, an engineer, a teacher, or an artist. And they follow that path with remarkable clarity and focus. But for many others, the journey is much more uncertain, and it's not uncommon at all for students to change majors multiple times before finding the subject that truly feels right for them.
Yes, and I think it's really important to normalize that uncertainty because the truth is, most people don't just wake up one day with a perfect understanding of their passion or career direction. Sometimes it takes a lot of exploration, experimentation, and even a few failures before you discover what you're genuinely interested in. And even then, that interest might continue to evolve over time. I've known students who started out studying business because it felt like the safe or practical choice, but after a few semesters, they realized they were far more passionate about environmental science, literature, or even film production. And while society often puts pressure on young people to figure it out quickly, the truth is that changing your major is not only common, it's often a sign that you're learning more about yourself and the kind of work that energizes and excites you.
That's such a great point, Julia. And I think that sense of pressure you mentioned is worth exploring a bit more. In many cultures, students experience a huge amount of pressure, whether from parents, peers, or society in general, to choose a major that is seen as prestigious or financially rewarding, even if it's not something they personally enjoy or feel connected to. For example, in some families there might be an expectation to become a doctor, lawyer, or engineer, because those professions are traditionally viewed as stable and respectable. But if your interests are more artistic or entrepreneurial, it can be extremely difficult to go against those expectations, especially if you're worried about disappointing your family or facing criticism. So in that sense, choosing a major is not just an academic decision. It's also an emotional and even cultural one, and it often involves balancing your personal goals with the expectations that have been placed upon you.
Absolutely. And what makes it even more complex is the fact that a lot of 18 or 19-year-olds are asked to make these huge life decisions at a time when they're still figuring out who they are. I mean, think about it. At that age, you're transitioning out of high school, maybe living away from home for the first time, trying to make new friends, learning how to study independently. And on top of that, you're expected to choose a path that could affect your entire future. No wonder so many students feel stressed, anxious, or even lost during that time. And I want to emphasize to our listeners today, if that's how you feel, you are not alone. It's okay not to have everything figured out right away, and it's okay to change direction if something doesn't feel right.
That's beautifully said, Julia. And I think this is a great moment to bring in some practical language, because this is such a common topic in both academic and casual conversations. There are certain English phrases and expressions that are really useful to know when you're talking about your major, your studies, or even your indecision. So, Julia, what are some helpful expressions students might hear or use when discussing their major?
Sure. Let's go through a few common and very natural sounding expressions that students use all the time when talking about this topic. One of the most basic and useful phrases is, I'm majoring in. For example, you might say, I'm majoring in economics, or I'm majoring in computer science. This simply means that your main area of study, your academic focus, is in that subject. It's very straightforward and polite. Another common one is, I switched my major from subject to subject. So you could hear someone say, I switched my major from biology to psychology because I realized I was more interested in understanding human behavior than in working in a lab. You might also hear someone say, I'm still undecided. This is a great way to express that you haven't yet chosen a major. It's a very common situation, and using the word undecided makes it clear without sounding negative. Then there's the phrase, it's a competitive field. This is often used when talking about majors where there are limited spots or high academic standards. For example, nursing is a competitive field, or it's hard to get into the business program because it's very competitive. And finally, a very expressive phrase that I love is, I'm passionate about this subject. This is such a strong and positive way to talk about your interests. For instance, you could say, I chose to study environmental science because I'm passionate about protecting the planet. It shows enthusiasm and personal connection to your field.
Those are excellent phrases, and I encourage our listeners to not just memorize them, but try to use them in real conversations or writing, because the more you personalize language, the more natural it becomes. And one more thing I'd add is that in many English-speaking countries, people often ask questions like, what are you studying? Or what's your major? When getting to know someone. It's such a common part of small talk, especially among students or at networking events. So being able to answer with confidence, even if you're undecided, is a great way to build fluency and make those conversations flow more naturally.
Totally agree, Adam. And since we're on the topic of choosing majors, I think it's also worth mentioning how the job market and future career opportunities influence these decisions. Some students choose a major because they're truly passionate about the subject, while others choose something they believe will lead to better job prospects or financial security. There's often a tension between what you love and what is practical. And sometimes, students have to find creative ways to balance both. Maybe that means double majoring, or combining a more practical major with a minor in a subject they're passionate about. There's no single right answer, just a lot of individual choices based on your goals and circumstances.
Exactly. And sometimes your major doesn't even define your career in the end. Many people end up working in fields completely unrelated to their degrees, simply because life takes them in new and unexpected directions. So while choosing a major is important, it's also important to stay open-minded and flexible. You never know where your path might lead, and your education is just one part of a much bigger journey. Now that we've explored the decision-making process behind choosing a major, something that often defines the academic side of university, I think it's time we shift our focus toward another equally important, and in many ways, more personal and emotionally rich aspect of higher education: life on campus. University life isn't just about attending lectures, writing essays, or passing exams. It's a multifaceted experience that includes everything from meeting new people and forming friendships, to discovering your independence, learning to manage your daily responsibilities, and in many cases, navigating an entirely new environment away from home for the first time.
Absolutely, Adam. And honestly, for many students, the memories they make during their time on campus are the ones that stay with them for the rest of their lives. There's something truly special about the rhythm of university life, the early morning classes, the late-night study sessions, the spontaneous group hangouts, the club meetings, the dorm room chats that go on until sunrise, the rush of midterm season, the silence of the library during finals week, and even the little moments like grabbing coffee between lectures or sitting on the grass with friends between classes. It's a time of growth and discovery, not just academically, but emotionally and socially as well. And even though every student's experience is different, There are so many common elements of campus life that students all over the world can relate to in some way.
Right. And one of the biggest transitions for students, especially those moving away from home for the first time, is adapting to dorm life or campus housing. Imagine coming from your family home, where meals are cooked for you, laundry gets done automatically, and you probably have a room all to yourself. And then suddenly finding yourself sharing a small space with one or even several roommates, trying to figure out how to cook pasta without burning the pot, learning how to do laundry without shrinking all your clothes, and most importantly, trying to coexist peacefully with people who may have completely different lifestyles, habits, or sleep schedules than yours. Dorm life can be incredibly exciting because you're constantly surrounded by other students your age, but it can also be challenging, especially when it comes to issues like privacy, noise, and cleanliness.
Yes. And let's not forget about roommate culture, which is a huge part of campus life in many Western countries, especially in places like the US, Canada, and the UK. Learning how to communicate with your roommate, set boundaries, and resolve conflicts is practically a crash course in real-life interpersonal skills. Some people become best friends with their roommates, while others just learn to coexist. And that's totally okay. Then there's the responsibility of managing your own time. Unlike high school, where your schedule is mostly structured and monitored by teachers or parents, university gives you a lot of freedom. And with that freedom comes the responsibility to organize your day effectively, make it to class on time, meet deadlines, attend group projects, and still find time to eat, sleep, socialize, and maybe even get some exercise in. For many students, especially in their first year, time management becomes one of the most critical life skills they develop during their university experience.
Exactly. And I think one of the things that makes university so unique is the balance between structure and flexibility. On one hand, you have required classes, specific deadlines, and long-term academic goals, but on the other hand, you're in charge of how you organize your day-to-day life. And that brings us to one of the best parts of campus life: student clubs, organizations, and extracurricular activities. These are the spaces where students can pursue their passions, meet people with similar interests, and sometimes even discover new hobbies or talents they never knew they had. Whether it's joining a debate team, volunteering for a social cause, participating in a theater group, or even starting your own podcast club, the opportunities are almost endless. And being involved in student life can make your university experience much richer and more meaningful.
Totally. And then there's the social aspect, which, let's be honest, is one of the biggest parts of university life that students look forward to. Whether it's attending campus events, going to parties, hanging out in the student union, or just chatting in the cafeteria between classes, those everyday social interactions are so important for building friendships, creating memories, and reducing stress. Of course, every campus has its own culture, and social life can vary widely depending on the size of the school, the country, and even the local community. But one thing most students experience, no matter where they are, is the feeling of being surrounded by people who are all going through similar struggles, dreams, deadlines, and discoveries. There's a kind of shared energy on university campuses that makes it feel like you're part of something bigger, a little world within the larger world. And let's not forget one more useful term, TA, which stands for Teaching Assistant. So, ATA is usually a graduate student who helps out with undergraduate classes. They might run small discussion sections, grade assignments, or answer student questions during office hours. For example, you might hear someone say, "He's a TA for that course. He runs the lab sessions on Fridays." And these kinds of expressions, all-nighter TA, brutal finals week, they're not just vocabulary, they're part of the everyday rhythm of student life. When you understand them, you understand the culture better. That's why if you're an English learner planning to study abroad, or even just interested in how university culture works in English-speaking countries, Learning this kind of informal real-world language is just as important as understanding academic vocabulary.
Absolutely, Julia. And I love that you mentioned the importance of culture, because campus life isn't just about what you study. It's also about how you live, how you connect with others, and how you grow as a person. So for our listeners today, especially those who are either preparing to study abroad or are already navigating university life, I want to say, embrace the challenges, enjoy the freedom, learn from your mistakes, and make the most of every moment, because campus life is truly one of the most transformative periods you'll ever experience.
One of the most frequently discussed and highly requested topics from our listeners is the experience of studying abroad, which, for many people, represents not only an exciting academic adventure, but also a deeply personal journey of growth, self-discovery, and cultural immersion that can shape their lives in ways they never expected. It's easy to think of studying abroad as just taking classes in another country, but in reality, it's about so much more. It's about stepping into a completely unfamiliar environment, adapting to different social norms and communication styles, learning to navigate daily life in a new language, and ultimately gaining a broader perspective on the world and your place in it.
That's so true, Julia, and I think one of the first things students realize when they begin their studies in a foreign country is that the challenges they face go far beyond the academic curriculum, because they're also dealing with a wide range of emotional, social, and cultural adjustments that require patience, resilience, and a willingness to embrace the unknown. For example, something as seemingly simple as understanding how the grading system works or knowing how to properly format an academic essay can feel like a major obstacle when it's done differently than what you're used to. And when those challenges are combined with things like homesickness, language barriers, or unfamiliar food and weather, the whole experience can feel both overwhelming and exhilarating at the same time.
Exactly. And let's not forget that adjusting to a new educational system means you're also dealing with different teaching styles, classroom dynamics, and academic expectations that might be completely different from what you've experienced before. For instance, in some countries, professors expect students to be highly independent, participate in discussions, and challenge ideas openly, while in others, the approach might be more lecture-based and formal. This shift can be surprising for students who are used to a certain way of learning, and it takes time to build the confidence to speak up in class, ask questions, and engage with the material in a new way, especially when you're doing all of this in your second or third language.
Yes. And speaking of language, the linguistic challenges are often one of the most underestimated aspects of studying abroad, because even students who are highly proficient in English can find it difficult to understand local accents, slang, idioms, or cultural references that native speakers use in casual conversation or academic discussions. It's one thing to pass a language test, and it's another thing entirely to keep up with a fast-paced group discussion in a seminar, interpret the subtle meanings in a professor's feedback, or write a research paper using complex vocabulary and correct academic formatting, all while processing the emotional and social changes that come with being in a foreign country.
Exactly. And that's why one of the best pieces of advice I always give to students studying abroad is to put yourself in as many interactive and communicative situations as possible. Join group discussions, attend language exchange meetups, volunteer on campus, or participate in clubs, because these activities not only improve your fluency and listening skills, but also help you form meaningful connections with other students, both local and international, which can be incredibly comforting when you're far from home. The more you speak, the more confident you'll become, and the faster you'll start to feel like you belong in your new environment. And those friendships you build along the way can become some of the most supportive and enduring parts of your experience abroad.
And I love that you mentioned connection, because being in a foreign country can sometimes feel lonely or isolating at first, especially if you're struggling to communicate or don't know anyone yet. But the truth is, most international students are going through similar feelings, and simply reaching out, whether that means introducing yourself to your classmates, asking for help when you need it, or attending orientation events, can open the door to some amazing relationships and unforgettable experiences. It's also worth remembering that many universities offer dedicated support services for international students, including academic writing centers, mental health counseling, visa assistance, and language workshops. So don't hesitate to use those resources because they exist to help you succeed.
Right. And another helpful strategy is to set realistic expectations for yourself. It's totally normal to feel culture shock, to miss your family, or to struggle with coursework at the beginning. And being kind to yourself during that transition is so important. Rather than expecting everything to go perfectly from day one, try to celebrate small victories, like successfully opening a bank account, having your first full conversation in English, or finding your way around campus without getting lost, because all of those little steps add up and build your confidence over time.
And remember that studying abroad isn't just about what you learn inside the classroom. It's about becoming more open-minded, independent, and adaptable in ways that will serve you for the rest of your life. When you study in another country, you begin to see your own culture from a new perspective, and you develop a deeper appreciation for the diversity of human experience. And that kind of growth is something no textbook can teach. So whether you're preparing to apply to a university overseas, already adjusting to life as an international student, or just curious about what the experience is like, we want to encourage you to embrace the journey fully, with all its ups and downs, because it will shape you in ways you can't yet imagine. Let's shift gears and dive into one of the most universally dreaded aspects of student life: exams. Whether you're in high school, college, or graduate school, exams seem to be a constant, looming presence in the background of every academic year. It doesn't matter if you're taking a math test, a history final, or writing a research paper. The reality is that exams bring a level of pressure, anxiety, and stress that most students simply cannot avoid. It's almost as if this pressure to perform academically is baked into the very fabric of the education system itself. The countdown to exam week, the stress of trying to remember everything you've learned throughout the semester, and the undeniable weight that one test can have on your overall grade. It's a challenge that nearly every student has to face at some point, and it can be mentally and emotionally draining.
Oh, absolutely. There's no denying the immense pressure that students face when it comes to exams, and I think that part of what makes it so overwhelming is the fact that there's often an expectation not just to pass, but to perform at a level that exceeds basic competence. In some cases, students feel as though their entire future hinges on how well they do on a single test or set of tests. And this isn't just about academic achievement. It also ties directly into things like securing scholarships, getting into prestigious programs, or even landing that first job after graduation. In addition to this, there's also a cultural aspect to the pressure. Many students, regardless of their academic prowess, internalize the idea that anything less than perfection is somehow a failure. This mindset can lead to an unhealthy obsession with grades and an overwhelming sense of anxiety as exams approach. It's common to hear students say things like, "I'm cramming for the exam," "I'm aiming for a high GPA," "I barely passed," "This subject is not my strong suit." Each of these phrases highlights something different about the emotional and psychological toll exams can have on students. Whether it's about last-minute studying in a panic, the pressure to maintain an outstanding GPA, the disappointment of struggling with a subject, or the crushing reality of barely passing despite all the effort. It's clear that exams aren't just a test of academic knowledge, but also a test of mental endurance and emotional resilience.
Exactly, Julia. And when it comes to cramming, which is a word that probably resonates with just about everyone, it's a perfect example of how stress and poor time management can cause students to resort to extreme last-minute study sessions. Cramming is essentially the practice of trying to stuff as much information into your brain as possible in a very short amount of time, typically the night before the exam, because the feeling of not being prepared is often too overwhelming to ignore. It's a survival mechanism, really, but it's not an effective or sustainable strategy. Not only does it leave you feeling physically exhausted, but it also raises your anxiety levels, making it harder to focus and retain the material you're trying to learn. Unfortunately, despite knowing that cramming isn't the best way to approach studying, many students continue to do it because they either procrastinate or feel like they don't have enough time to prepare properly. The result? Well, it's not uncommon for students to leave the exam room feeling like they didn't actually learn anything, and often that's reflected in their grades.
Right. And the issue of cramming brings us to another important aspect of academic pressure: the constant comparison between ourselves and others. We hear phrases like, "I'm aiming for a high GPA" all the time because many students place an enormous amount of value on their GPA as the ultimate indicator of their success. A high GPA can open doors to scholarships, job opportunities, and graduate school programs. But it also becomes a source of constant stress, as students often feel they need to keep their grades at an almost unattainable level. This emphasis on GPA can create a sense of competition among peers that sometimes spirals into unhealthy comparison. What happens is that some students begin to feel like they're not measuring up if they don't maintain a certain grade, or if they fail to get the A that they believe is required to succeed. It becomes less about the actual learning experience and more about the external validation that comes from having high marks, which isn't always the healthiest mindset.
Absolutely, and that external validation is something we see all the time in educational systems, especially in environments where the focus is primarily on grades rather than the development of skills or knowledge. In fact, when grades become the main metric by which success is measured, it can diminish the joy of learning itself, turning it into a competitive game where the primary goal is not to understand the material, but to outperform others. Many students, under this kind of pressure, will say things like, "This subject is not my strong suit," which is often a way of expressing frustration, disappointment, or the feeling of failure when things don't go as expected. But what's important to remember is that struggling with a subject doesn't mean you're failing as a student or a person. It simply means that everyone has different strengths, and some subjects require more effort or a different approach to master. Unfortunately, this is something that gets lost in the pressure to perform, and some students may internalize the idea that not excelling in every subject is somehow a personal flaw.
Yes, and there's something particularly damaging about the way academic pressure can distort our self-perception. Because as you mentioned, if a student doesn't do well on an exam or struggles with a particular subject, they might start to believe that they're simply not good enough, or that they're not as capable as their peers. But in reality, these exams are often not an accurate reflection of a person's intelligence, talent, or potential. The focus on grades can create a cycle of stress and self-doubt, where students feel like they have to constantly chase perfection, regardless of how much effort they put in or how much they actually understand the material. The truth is, academic pressure and grades are only one small part of what it means to succeed. And it's important for students to realize that learning and growing are much more important than the number on a transcript.
Exactly, Julia. And this brings us to a critical point. It's essential to find balance. While exams, grades, and academic expectations will always play a significant role in education, they should never be the sole focus of a student's academic journey. Students should be encouraged to embrace the learning process, ask for help when they need it, take breaks to manage stress, and focus on developing skills that will serve them in the real world beyond just getting high marks. It's important for both students and educators to remember that academic success isn't just about grades. It's about fostering curiosity, building resilience, and developing a deep understanding of the subject matter.
University life, while incredibly rewarding, isn't always smooth sailing. For many students, it can be a time filled with challenges that extend far beyond just academic work. The transition from high school to university, or from one educational system to another, can often feel like a roller coaster ride. There are moments of excitement, but also moments of doubt, confusion, and difficulty. Many students struggle with managing the overwhelming amount of assignments, exams, and deadlines, which can result in extreme stress, feelings of loneliness, and, in some cases, even burnout. It's important to recognize that these struggles are not just isolated experiences, but something that almost every student faces at some point during their university years. The pressure to succeed both academically and socially can sometimes feel like it's too much to bear, leading many students to feel isolated in their challenges, unsure of where to turn for help.
That's right, Julia. And when we talk about mental health, we're addressing something that is incredibly crucial, especially in the context of university life. The reality is that while university is often a time of personal growth and development, it can also be a time where mental health issues are exacerbated by the pressures of academic life, social expectations, and personal struggles. Whether it's the stress of balancing assignments and exams, the pressure to meet high expectations, or the anxiety of living away from home for the first time, these factors can combine in ways that make it difficult for students to thrive. What's concerning is that many students don't always feel comfortable reaching out for help, either because they feel embarrassed or because they don't know where to turn for support. Mental health issues like anxiety, depression, and stress are real, and they can have a significant impact on a student's well-being, their academic performance, and their ability to fully engage with their studies.
Absolutely, Adam. It's critical that universities acknowledge and address these issues by providing adequate mental health support. Many institutions are becoming more proactive in offering counseling services, workshops on stress management, and even mental health days, where students can take a break from their academic responsibilities to focus on their mental health. These services are incredibly valuable because they provide a safe space for students to talk about their struggles, seek professional guidance, and learn coping mechanisms that can help them manage their stress and anxiety. However, it's also important for students to recognize that their mental health is just as important as their academic success, and that they should prioritize self-care. Taking care of oneself, both physically and mentally, is essential for maintaining a healthy balance while in university. Simple things like ensuring you eat well, get enough sleep, and take regular breaks from studying can make a huge difference in how well you cope with the demands of university life.
You're absolutely right. Mental health doesn't just encompass extreme conditions like depression or anxiety. It also includes everyday well-being, how we manage stress, how we take care of our bodies, and how we approach challenges in a healthy way. For many students, it can be easy to overlook the importance of rest and relaxation because there's this overwhelming sense that you have to be constantly working or studying to stay ahead. But the reality is that overworking yourself can lead to burnout, which is not only detrimental to your mental health, but can also negatively affect your academic performance in the long run. Universities are beginning to understand that students need a more holistic approach to education, one that includes mental health resources and support. This shift is necessary as it recognizes that students cannot perform at their best academically if their mental health needs are not being met.
Exactly. And for students, it's equally important to recognize that asking for help isn't a sign of weakness. It's a sign of strength. Seeking support, whether it's from a counselor, a trusted friend, or even a family member, is a proactive step toward maintaining your well-being. It's important to remember that no one should feel alone in their struggles. Most students, no matter how successful they may appear, go through difficult times and may experience moments of stress, self-doubt, and frustration. That's completely normal. The key is recognizing when you need help and being willing to reach out for support before the pressure becomes overwhelming. After all, university is a time of growth, and part of that growth involves learning how to manage your emotional and mental well-being in healthy ways.
Absolutely, Julia. Taking care of your mental health while managing the pressures of university life can be difficult, but it's essential for maintaining long-term well-being. It's not about avoiding stress altogether, because let's face it, stress is a natural part of life. but rather about learning how to cope with it in a way that doesn't negatively affect your mental or physical health. Universities that provide comprehensive support systems, including access to counseling, stress management workshops, and peer support networks, are helping students navigate these challenges more effectively. However, it's equally important for students to be proactive in managing their own well-being, whether that means practicing mindfulness, developing healthy study habits, or simply taking time to relax and recharge when needed. Let's take a step into the future now. With the rise of online learning platforms, artificial intelligence tools, and the increasing reliance on digital resources, it's hard not to wonder, how will education evolve in the coming years? We're already seeing major shifts in how and where learning happens, from the flexibility of online courses to the ability to learn at your own pace through pre-recorded lectures, interactive platforms, and virtual classrooms. Technology is undoubtedly transforming the way students access educational materials and interact with teachers and peers. But despite the convenience and accessibility of these tools, there are still questions about how education as a whole will continue to adapt and change as we move forward. Julia, how do you envision education evolving in the future?
It's a great question, Adam. Honestly, when I think about the future of education, I believe we're going to see a shift towards a much more personalized and customized learning experience, thanks to advancements in technology, particularly in artificial intelligence. The traditional one-size-fits-all model of education, where students are taught the same material in the same way at the same pace, is slowly becoming outdated. Now, with the help of AI, we can have learning tools that adapt to each individual student's needs and pace. Imagine a world where every student has access to a personalized learning plan that targets their strengths and weaknesses, where lessons are adjusted to their preferred learning style, whether that's visual, auditory, or hands-on. This type of customization could make learning more efficient, more engaging, and ultimately, more effective. In addition, online learning platforms are making education far more accessible to people all over the world, regardless of where they live, their financial situation, or their ability to attend a traditional classroom. This democratization of education is something that has the potential to be truly transformative, making high-quality learning available to anyone with an internet connection.
I couldn't agree more. The idea of making learning more accessible is one of the most exciting prospects for the future. With online education, students no longer have to be physically present in a classroom to access top-tier lectures, materials, or resources. They can learn from anywhere, at any time, and at a pace that suits them. This flexibility not only opens up opportunities for those who might not have been able to attend university due to geographical or financial constraints, but also allows people to continue learning throughout their entire lives, not just in their early years, but well into their careers. And when you combine the power of AI with that flexibility, you're creating an environment where learning is constantly evolving, adjusting to the learner's needs, and providing them with feedback and tools in real time. The role of the teacher will likely shift too. Rather than simply delivering lectures, educators may become more like guides or mentors who help students navigate personalized learning journeys, providing support and expertise as needed.
Yes, and I think that while technology will play an increasingly large role in education, there will still be a need for the human connection that comes with in-person learning. No matter how advanced the tools become, there's something irreplaceable about face-to-face interaction. In a classroom setting, students have the opportunity to engage with their peers, participate in discussions, ask questions, and build relationships with their teachers. These interactions go beyond just academic learning. They also foster social and emotional development. I believe the future of education will not be about choosing between online or in-person learning, but about finding ways to blend both in a meaningful way. This idea of hybrid learning, where students have the flexibility to learn online, but also come together in person for certain activities, workshops, or group projects, will likely become more common. With the added layer of technology, this hybrid model could combine the best of both worlds, providing students with the autonomy and convenience of online education while still offering the collaborative and personal experience of a traditional classroom.
Absolutely, Julia. The future of education is definitely leaning towards a more hybrid model, and this idea of combining the benefits of both online and in-person experiences could help create a more balanced, effective, and dynamic learning environment. For example, students could engage with lectures and learning materials at their own pace, allowing them to better digest the content and then come together for hands-on activities, discussions, or live Q&A sessions that provide a deeper, more interactive experience. This model can also help cater to the needs of different types of learners, as some students may prefer the independence and flexibility of learning from home, while others might thrive in a traditional classroom environment. Additionally, technology will enable universities and educators to collect data on how students are learning and where they might be struggling, which could lead to even more personalized and effective teaching methods.
Another aspect of this shift in education that I find fascinating is how the focus might move more towards skills-based learning rather than just acquiring degrees or certifications. For so long, the model has been centered around earning a degree in a specific field. But with the rise of online courses, boot camps, and micro-credentials, we're starting to see more emphasis placed on acquiring specific skills that can be directly applied in the workforce. This is particularly important as the job market continues to change and evolve with new industries, technologies, and roles emerging at an unprecedented rate. A degree might not always be the best indicator of someone's ability to perform a specific job. And in some cases, it's the practical skills and hands-on experience that matter more. We're already seeing companies place greater value on skill sets and real-world experience rather than just formal education, and I think this trend will continue in the future. Students will increasingly be able to earn qualifications and certifications that are tailored to the skills they need for a particular career, whether that's coding, digital marketing, data analysis, or project management.
Yes, and the future of education is going to be incredibly exciting because of this shift towards skills-based learning. Traditional degrees are still important in many fields, but they're no longer the only path to success. In fact, as industries evolve and new technologies are developed, there will likely be a growing emphasis on lifelong learning, where students of all ages are encouraged to continuously update and refine their skills throughout their careers. Universities will need to adapt to this by offering more flexible learning options that allow people to learn in bite-sized chunks, earn micro-credentials, and gain hands-on experience in real-world scenarios. It's likely that the education system will become much more modular, where students can pick and choose the courses and qualifications they need, building their education around their career goals and personal interests, rather than following a one-size-fits-all path. With AI and other emerging technologies playing a big role in this process, we could see education become more interactive, immersive, and tailored to individual needs than ever before.
Absolutely. In fact, as the workforce continues to change with the rise of automation, artificial intelligence, and other technological advancements, education will need to adjust to prepare students for jobs that may not even exist yet. This is where flexible, skills-based education can really shine, as it can be adapted quickly to meet the demands of the job market. Students will no longer be limited to a rigid curriculum, but will be able to pursue learning opportunities that are relevant to the fast-evolving landscape of work. Ultimately, the future of education will likely be characterized by greater flexibility, accessibility, and a deeper focus on practical skills, while still preserving the value of human connection and critical thinking. It's a very exciting time for education, and as we move forward, we'll likely see even more innovations that change the way we learn, interact with others, and build our careers. Wow, what an incredible discussion we've had today. We've covered so much ground, from looking at the different school systems around the world to exploring the ins and outs of university life, dealing with the pressures of exams, and even diving into the exciting and life-changing experience of studying abroad. We've also taken a deep dive into what the future of education might look like with the rise of technology and personalized learning. It's been a real journey, and I hope everyone listening has found something useful, interesting, or even a little inspiring as we've explored these key aspects of the educational experience. There's so much more to learn, and we've really just scratched the surface of all the important conversations that we could have around education and university life.
I completely agree with you, Julia. We've really covered a wide range of topics today, and I think one of the things I love most about this episode is that we've not only talked about the challenges and pressures that come with university life, but also the opportunities that education, in all its forms, can provide. From understanding the different educational systems around the world to discussing how we navigate difficult situations like exams and academic stress, we've also touched on the transformative experiences that education can offer, such as studying abroad and gaining new perspectives. And of course, we didn't forget to highlight the exciting ways in which education is evolving with technology and the potential for more flexible, skills-based learning options. As always, we used some natural, advanced vocabulary along the way, which I'm sure our listeners found valuable. So, remember, don't hesitate to replay sections of this episode. Take notes on any new words or phrases that stood out to you, and even try shadowing our conversation. It's a fantastic way to improve your own speaking skills.
Exactly, Adam. One of the most effective ways to improve your English is by immersing yourself in the language, and what better way to do that than by listening to a conversation like the one we've had today? By replaying sections of the podcast and focusing on specific phrases or expressions, you can not only expand your vocabulary, but also get more comfortable with the rhythm and flow of natural English conversation. And remember, it's not just about understanding the words. It's about using them in your own life and practice. So, whether you're preparing for exams, getting ready to study abroad, or just trying to make your way through university life, these are the types of real-world English conversations that can help you sound more fluent and confident when you speak.
And of course, we want to hear from you. If you've enjoyed this episode and found it useful, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the English Globe for more episodes like this one. We're always looking to bring you fresh content that can help you not only improve your English, but also give you a deeper understanding of important topics. So if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an episode. And, as always, we want to know what you think. After all, this podcast is about you and your learning journey. Let us know in the comments what your university experience was like, or if you have any questions or thoughts about the topics we covered today. We're always excited to hear from you and connect with our listeners.
That's right, Adam. We'd love to hear your personal stories, experiences, and even your challenges when it comes to education. How was your experience studying abroad? Or what's it like in your country's school system? Do you have any advice for others going through university life, or tips for dealing with stress, exams, or even finding the right major? We want to make sure this podcast is as interactive as possible, so feel free to share your thoughts with us. Plus, your feedback really helps us shape future episodes and make sure we're addressing the topics that matter most to you. We believe in creating a learning community, and your input helps us do that.
Exactly. Your voice is important to us, so don't hesitate to reach out and engage with us in the comments section. And as always, thank you so much for tuning in and being part of the English Globe community. We really appreciate every single one of our listeners, and we love creating content that helps you on your English learning journey. So, whether you're listening during your commute, while you're working out, or at home, we hope this episode has given you some valuable insights, new vocabulary, and motivation to keep improving your English.
That's right. And as we always say, keep practicing, keep learning, and never give up on your journey. No matter what stage you're at, whether you're just starting to learn English or already advanced, remember that every step forward is progress. And the more you immerse yourself in English, the more confident and capable you'll become. Keep challenging yourself to improve, and don't be afraid to make mistakes along the way, because that's all part of the process.
So, thanks again for listening, everyone. We hope you enjoyed today's episode as much as we did. Keep learning, keep pushing yourself, and we can't wait to be back with you in the next episode. Stay tuned for more English learning tips, conversations, and content to help you succeed. Until next time, take care, and we'll see you soon.